Okay, let's now turn our attention to assignment number 4. And what I'm going to do is kind of walk you through the specification part, and then we'll take a look at the skeletons and the tests. Now, what assignment number 4 is going to do is it's going to build upon assignment number 3, which, as you saw, was based on exception safety. I should probably say exception safety because it's not entirely strong exception safety, although there is a bit of that. So it's strong and or weak exception safety. And assignment number 3 also focused on rule of 5 methods. So constructor, or rather copy constructor, move constructor, copy assignment operator, move assignment operator, and destructor. And what you're going to do now is you're going to, of course, fix all those things because there's lots of things to fix from assignment number 3. And then you're also going to add support for iterators to your Arraylist implementation. And if you do this right, by the way, you'll not only be able to add in iterator support, but you'll also be able to go back and clean up a lot of your assignment 3 code because you won't necessarily have to do iterating through the underlying scoped arrays, but you'll actually be able to use iterators that are part of STL to do a lot of the work. So you should be able to refactor your implementation of Arraylist itself using those iterators and make them a lot more concise and much, much cleaner and easier to understand. So I would also recommend you do that at the same time. And then what we're going to do is we're actually going to grade. We're not going to grade assignment number 3 per se. We're going to grade assignment number 4, and that'll include the part for assignment number 3 and the part for assignment number 4. And that's because there's such a high degree of overlap between the 2 assignments. In fact, I was originally going to put the iterators as part of assignment 3, but we hadn't gotten to that part of the course yet. So assignment 4 will be a double score for assignment 3 and assignment 4. The assignment 3 part being the Arraylist, the assignment 4 part being the iterator. So as usual, we give you some source files. We have the Arraylist part from before. And again, please feel free to add in helper methods as you see fit. And then we're also going to add in Arraylist iter. And Arraylist iter is a class that's going to implement a non-const iterator for Arraylist. And then there's also a bunch of other files we give you for testing and building and so on. And I'm going to talk about the array test and array iter test files because those are the ones that you have to really focus on because otherwise you won't know whether your code is correct or not. So please always make sure that you run your unit tests and you try to get them all working. So Arraylist and Arraylist iter will contain comments that the header files will contain comments that you have to follow in order to implement the functionality, and you'll end up basically improving your Arraylist.cpp implementation based on my feedback and our discussions in the frequently made mistakes video. And then you also have to implement Arraylist iter. And again, you should do this in an exception safe manner. And I probably should qualify this about strongly exception safe. Let's just say exception safe manner. So be strong where you can in things like the assignment operators and so on, but for things like set, don't worry about being strongly exception safe there. Just be exception safe. You should copy your scoped array.h and scoped array.cpp files from your previous assignments and make sure that they work and then use them here. You probably shouldn't need a whole lot of change there unless you've got some bugs that are lurking from earlier. Use the, don't use the link. Use the submission form and do all the things we've been doing heretofore. Let's see. So make sure you implement all the functionality, make sure it's exception safe, and make sure it implements the rule of 5 methods. And then finally, please feel free wherever you need to add helper methods like the resize method we were talking about, or any other methods you see, like check range, for example. Please feel free to add those methods to your implementation. And the goal is always to try to make your code less repetitive, less duplicative, more clear and concise. And also, please try to get in the habit of using STL algorithms wherever you can. These will especially be things like copy and fill. And I suppose, I'm trying to think if you can use remove. You might actually be able to use the STL remove algorithm. If you really want to be cool, see if you can use STL remove. That would be a really nice win, because then your remove method will become way, way simpler. So I know some of you have already gone to the effort of changing your code to use fill or fill in and copy. So for those of you who are sort of on the cutting edge of that, see if you can use remove as well. That would be pretty cool. Everything else is just like it's always been, honor code stuff. Don't modify the files other than to change, you can add in helper methods, that's okay. And obviously you need to make sure the work is your own. If you have any questions, please let me know. Every once in a while, something will sneak in, and it really helps to just ask for clarification on Piazza, and you'll get a response very quickly. Okay, so let's take a look. Here's the Arraylist file. This is what we've seen before. Nothing particularly surprising here. In fact, I think it's pretty much identical to what you did before. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about this class, except you can see we don't actually need consider. I'll go back and delete that. Consider is not part of this assignment. I removed that. A consider is basically an iterator that has the writable operator dereference removed. So it didn't seem like it would teach you anything more to add that. So I'll go ahead and get rid of those methods. Feel free to just remove them from your file. Otherwise, it won't compile. Scoped array, of course, you have to add in your scoped array. You have to add in the arraylist.cpp file, which I would recommend what you do is you start by cleaning up assignment 3's implementation. Get it in really good shape, and then go ahead and kind of copy that over. Once it passes all the tests for assignment 3, copy that over to assignment 4, and then start to work on assignment 4. So be careful when you copy it over so that you don't overwrite anything. Like, don't copy over your arraylist.h file from assignment 3 to assignment 4, because there's some extra methods here that are missing that you'll need to have. But you can copy, I think you should be able to copy over your assignment 3 arraylist.cpp file. That should be fine. Okay, now let's go take a look at Arraylist iter, which is the new part. So you can see here that Arraylist iter is going to inherit from iterator, and it's going to implement the random access iterator, and it's also going to be parameterized by type T, which is the same type that's parameterized here, and also parameterized with your array. We don't need to have a default constructor. You should never be using that. And then we go ahead and implement all the methods that you'd expect in a random access iterator. So equality and inequality operations, the non-const and const dereference operator, operator star. We have the arrow operators, which are just kind of syntactic sugar for these if you want to call them in a more pointer-centric way, where you're going to be calling methods on something through this. We have the pre-increment and post-increment operators. Those are tricky, and well, pre-increment's not tricky. Post-increment's a little tricky. And then we have the corresponding pre-decrement and post-decrement operators. And again, pre-decrement is easy. Post-decrement's a little tricky, and we'll talk more about that in a second. And then we've got the plus and minus operator, and we also have iterator subtraction, and operator plus equal and minus equal, and operator subscript. So these are pretty much the full complement of random access iterator operators that are overloaded that you'll need to define. Now, there's a couple ways you can learn how to implement these methods. So one way is if you go take a look at when I talked about these capabilities for iterators, I gave you some pointers to material online that talks about how to implement iterators. That's one way. And then the other way is I have a video, which I'll be talking about this stuff in our class, but if you want to get a head start on this, I did a video the other day as part of my C++ standard template library by example webinar series. The very last video in that series talks about how to implement bidirectional iterators for our simple string class. And I think I sent this out in a posting to Piazza when I announced this assignment. So you might want to go take a look at that discussion. That'll give you some good tips on how to implement some of these features. But you'll need to go above and beyond what's in that video because, of course, you have to implement more than just the bidirectional parts. You have to also do the random access parts. So these particular implementations of these methods, they're not really very hard, but they do take some thought. And as usual, by the time you're done, they'll each be 1 or 2 lines long probably. But some of the stuff is a little tricky. So it's important to start early and come to office hours, ask questions. Absolutely do not wait to the last minute and try to figure this out. You should have plenty of time to work on it. It's due on Wednesday of next week, the initial submission. And then in the private part of the class, you can see here that we have there's different ways to implement this. This is going to have a pointer to the element in the array. And there's various ways you can implement this stuff under the hood. This is one way to do it. Okay, so that's basically the implementation of the specification of the API for iterators. If you come over to the tests, you'll see that we have the array test from before, and it's pretty similar to before. I made one little difference here. In the swap test, I tweaked it a little bit so that swap is now going to be able to do the swap method is now going to be able to use the range-based for loop. Oh no, you may have to add the swap method to Arraylist. I'll go back and fix that too. I may have neglected to put swap in the skeleton. It's easy to add. You already have it in your code, I believe, from assignment number 3. So here, what you need to make sure that you're doing is you're implementing the iterator for Arraylist, because that's what the range-based for loop is using under the hood in order to be able to do the range-based for loop syntax for this particular test. So this test won't compile until you have the iterator stuff defined. And then it should work fine as long as your iterator works. Then over here we have the iter tests. And basically what they do is they create array lists, and then they have iterators, and then they go ahead and do various things. They check to see if equality and inequality, and then they check to see if the values are equal, and so on and so forth. So we check begin, we check dereference, showing how you can use this on the left-hand side. And again, there's lots of different things that are shown here as far as how this stuff gets used. And let's see, we have consts and incrementing. So it's showing how you can use plus equal. That's a nice random access method. Let's see, this one is doing a const and showing that you can do that properly too. We do increment and decrement with a whole bunch of tests, some basic arithmetic things where you're subtracting begin and end. Probably should be using the distance algorithm here to be strictly compliant, but this should work fine for your purposes. And then we also go ahead and check the end iterator to make sure it's what we expect, so we can iterate through this properly. So lots of tests showing up here. If you have any questions, let me know. If for some reason the skeletons are acting a little wonky, let me know. I'll be happy to jump on that right away and fix it as quickly as possible. Okay, so that's the walkthrough of assignment number 4. So the key thing for assignment number 4 is first get assignment number 3 working well, then add in the iterator support, and then I think you might want to go back and refactor some of your assignment 3 behavior in the Arraylist.cpp itself to take advantage of the fact that you've now got real STL iterators. And that'll clean up a lot of your code there, especially if you've been using STL algorithms. You'll be amazed at how clean it is. And it really teaches you something important about building containers where you want to kind of build them in a layered-like fashion. So once you have your iterators working, then you can refactor your implementation to make it cleaner and cleaner and cleaner. And that's a very good skill set to understand and to master. Okay, so with that, I'm going to wrap up the discussion of assignment number 4.